What's going on, guys? Today I thought I would do a quick impromptu video about how the left doesn't understand what modern men are going through. Your average left-winger or progressive has no idea how the red pill works, and I will be dismantling a couple of their key arguments from this video right here made by this creator, which will hopefully give you a better idea of how leftists, blue pillars, progressives, whatever you want to call them, are unable to accept reality as it is. Now, without further ado, let's dive right in.
Before the likes of Andrew Tate could run, the red pill had to walk. For those of you who aren't up to date with the history, the red pill is a philosophy, I use that term loosely, that argues that there are certain inalienable truths about the world, specifically about dating and relationships.
Before we get any further, just think for a moment about what it would mean if there weren't any inalienable or essential truths about the world, modern dating, human nature, etc. To suggest that there aren't essential truths and that nothing inherently has any sort of definitive essence or being, we just have sort of gradations and clusters of associations of traits with no definitive boundaries between any of them, is postmodernist, is radically constructivist. It's this viewpoint that the left has taken on that conflicts with physical reality.
And that to face these truths and to incorporate them as part of your life is to take the red pill. It's a loose analogy with The Matrix, the movie, where the main character has the choice between the red pill, which will force him into the somewhat unpleasant but genuine reality, or the blue pill, which will leave him sedated and in a state of false reality. It's a bit of a amusing analogy when you take like 5 minutes to read what the writers say that The Matrix is actually about, but that's beside the point.
You know, it really gets on my pet peeves when leftists say this, that they try to throw that card in your face. The Matrix is actually a trans allegory. So anytime you're using the phrase red pill, you're talking about a movie that's fundamentally about the trans experience, as they violently stroke themselves off. Because first of all, it wasn't even a thought in anyone's head that the Matrix was a trans allegory until after the Wachowskis came out. There's really not a whole lot of commentary on gender roles that I can even see in The Matrix from what I remember about it. And how good or meaningful is an allegory if it goes over everyone's heads the first time? Not even leftists picked up on this until, again, after the Wachowskis came out. And secondly, look at this quote right at the end here, down at the bottom of this article. Quote, "I don't know how present my transness was in the background of my brain as we were writing it," Wachowski said, "but it all came from the same sort of fire that I'm talking about," end quote. Maybe my trans identity influenced this piece of media is really not the same as I consciously constructed this work, this cinematic work, to be an allegory for my trans identity. Those are two very different things. And really, it seems like leftoids got Dumbledored here. It seems like this is a retconning to me. This does not seem like the Wachowskis are actually being totally truthful about what parts of their identity were influencing this work of media at what time. Seems kind of ham-fisted to say that this is somehow indirectly influenced by their trans identity. But anyway.
The red pill movement describes the world through these quite contrived models and schemas. They explain everything that a teenager could ever have questions about in terms of dating and relationships. I didn't have to settle anymore for the fact that people's behavior often didn't make sense to me. I wasn't bullied at school or whatever because the other kids had their own traumas and problems that they were unfairly letting out on me. I was bullied because there was a natural hierarchy in men and there were the alphas and the betas, and that was why everything that was negative in my life was taking place, because of this pre-existent hierarchy, this pre-existent system that was already fully explained by the red pill.
Yeah, and see right there's the beating heart of leftist social analysis. These leftists say all of this quote-unquote bullying or these hierarchies that exist at school are because of bigotry, which is produced by the inequality of capitalism. Not that people are fundamentally different in essence and will behave differently in the same system, but that all of this is actually arbitrary. All these distinctions are actually arbitrary. Everyone's fundamentally equal, and everyone would actually just perform the same in some sort of socialist utopia that they're going to establish in the near future. There's obviously an inherent hierarchy in men because an entirely male institution is going to be inevitably hierarchically organized. It looks like the military.
And specifically, the language that is used in these communities is really important to understanding why it's so appealing. What you'll notice if you spend any amount of time in what might be described as an incel community is that they often try to present their ideas as evidence-based. An evidence-based theory of the world was exactly what I needed to convince my impressionable mind. The idea of alpha and beta males is a classic example of this. It's an idea that originated from a study in captive wolves, and that today wildlife biologists have spent a lot of effort trying to retract. What we initially thought were like dominance hierarchies turned out to just be familial relationships. So the alphas of the family were just the parents of the cubs.
There is absolutely a great deal of psychologically damaging fatalism that goes on in certain incel and quote-unquote black pill circles online. But watch this other common talking point you'll see leftist apologists bring up when they're trying to quote-unquote debunk the red pill. It's a bit of a bait and switch. So the original terms alpha, beta, omega, etc. were used by these researchers who were studying hierarchy in wolves, and then because these researchers later wanted to retract what their analysis because it turns out they were like misidentifying hierarchy and these were just familial relationships, he takes that and he says, well, now you can't apply these terms to humans. And then therefore dominance hierarchies in humans are therefore arbitrary or the product of bigotry produced by patriarchal capitalism or just Western culture or whatever his boogeyman in particular is. And to be fair, even though we really shouldn't be, but to be fair, it is a little ham-fisted, and I don't really think there's some sort of set-in-stone category of alpha or beta or something like that. But dominance hierarchies are unquestionably there in humans. Like there are clearly people who are more confident, more competent, stronger leaders than others. Some are meant to lead, some are meant to follow. Maybe the category of alpha or beta, maybe those categories are a little bit unnuanced. But these terms being vague or poorly defined doesn't refute the idea that dominance hierarchies are inherent in humanity.
And the reality is that as an impressionable kid, I didn't understand this idea that, science can change over time and that ideas can be retracted upon further evidence. I just heard something that sounded like it made sense to me, and I thought, yeah, I'll take it. And to me today, who's on the other side of all of this, it's quite obvious how arbitrary this idea that you can look at nature and understand why people behave the way they do in such a granular level of detail as alphas and betas really is. Let me just demonstrate to you how easy it is to come up with an arbitrary set of conclusions and an arbitrary set of prescriptions on how humans should behave by looking at nature. So, any idea what this little cutie behind me is? Well, he's a bonobo. Bonobos are humans' closest genetic relatives. We actually share over 98% of our DNA with them. And so they're the perfect candidates for a little experiment. Let's do exactly what the red pill does and figure out what an ideal model of human society would look like based on nature. So, what would a bonobo-based society actually look like? Well, for starters, bonobos are matriarchal, meaning that the female members are almost exclusively the most powerful members of their social groups. When a little bonobo is born, they inherit their social rank from their mother, and they often rely on them later down the line to help them find a partner. Bonobos are also really, really gay. In fact, the majority of sexual interactions between bonobos are same-sex interactions, and they have tons of casual sex as well. They do it for conflict resolution or just to pass the time as well. And I don't know about you, but I think this model of society would look a little different to the one that the red pill would typically prescribe based on its assessment of nature. And I'm not making the argument that human society should be arranged exactly like bonobo society, but rather I just want to demonstrate how arbitrary it all is and how you can kind of reach any conclusion you want if you look at cherry-picked examples of what you describe as nature.
The issue is, though, that the examples from nature that the red pill tends to choose are not arbitrary. In every discussion ever that involves some liberal telling us all how we act more like chimps, but really we could be more like bonobos who are gay egalitarians, they never mention that bonobos are actually totally cut off from the rest of the area around them. Bonobos basically exist in this, I wouldn't call it an island, but this area in the Congo Basin between the Congo River and the Luabala River, also known as the Bonobo Triangle. And bonobos have basically impregnable natural barriers between them and other primate populations and no known predators. The utter reversal of all laws of nature we see in the bonobo, their rampant matriarchy and conflict resolving same sex behavior, is the result of their total isolation from the rest of the world. Imagine if for a moment we allowed a troop of chimpanzees to cross the river and enter into their territory. How do you think the bonobos would fare? How well do you think bonobos would do against a primate species which wages surprisingly organized war over territories in a manner reminiscent of primitive human states? Chimpanzees will literally gouge your eyes out and rip your nuts off. Like, how do you think bonobos would stand against that? Really, what bonobos are probably is like a group of primates that were once chimpanzees, got isolated from chimpanzees, and because they had no competition or natural predators, they just descended into this degenerate state. And I bet one of the real reasons we see these insane egalitarian philosophies pervading society today is not only because of elite influence, but because we have a decadent society with a people who are utterly removed, a population that has been utterly extracted from its natural environment. We could organize our society in a way where we didn't forget the lessons that nature tells us. Don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating for some sort of, anti-industrial society here. But to organize society in a way that doesn't transform us into bonobos involves coordinated hierarchies and patriarchal structures, which, of course, modern society is doing everything to destroy.
I think that even if I'd seen, the example of bonobos shown to me at age 15 or age 16, I don't think I necessarily would have been convinced because I had that deep-seated need for explanation. And a model of the world, even a model that was unfavorable to me, was better than no model at all. However, I do think that criticism like this has a useful effect because I've noticed that there's been a shift in the language that these communities use towards using language that would be more akin to economics, I would say. And there's one term that captures this idea really well. It's sexual market value. I know, just bear with me, okay? We're getting a bit deep in the sauce here. So your sexual market value is supposed to be one number that represents in its entirety how appealing you are to your potential partners. There are some quite in-depth pages on the internet that are like dedicated to finding like an objective method to calculate this.
First of all, I don't think criticism from leftists has caused the red pill to shift its language more towards economics or a dating market. Secondly, again, kind of like with the whole alpha-beta designation, even though there isn't necessarily a specific, objective, identifiable, static number in between 1 and 10, that doesn't mean that some people aren't objectively more attractive than other people. I bet the left would call this pretty privilege, quote unquote. When you call it pretty privilege and you frame it that way, suddenly it's a real concept. But then when you frame it as sexual market value, then suddenly it's not real. Suddenly it's fictitious. Suddenly it's only in people's heads.
Like, let me actually just take you down the rabbit hole a little bit, okay? So I wish I didn't know that this website existed, but I do know that it exists, and so you have to know about it too. It's called True Rate Me. It's a page on Reddit, right? And the purported mission of this page is to provide facial ratings of both men and women based on objective factors such as harmony, sexual dimorphism, symmetry, and qualities of their features. This is the epitome of this phenomenon I'm describing, of trying to take something that's obviously subjective, like attraction, and make it objective.
It's really not that subjective, though, and you're BSing yourself if you're saying that it is. Obviously, there's a pot for every lid. And I will readily admit that there are these incel and black pill sites or communities that are very willing to sort of doom monger and sort of feast off of the fear and anxiety of men by saying, "Oh, you'll never make it because your face isn't perfectly symmetrical and you don't have hunter eyes or whatever," or something stupid like that. But it, it still remains a point of fact that there is people who are like objectively attractive, who men, say Ryan Gosling or something, who women will bend over backwards for. Jeremy Meeks, that criminal guy. Women bent over backwards for that guy just based off on his face. Like, this was a career criminal. This unregenerate, unrepentant villain. And women were dying to get with this guy just because of how he looked. Like, SMV is a real thing. You can't pretend it's not. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you found it informative. I hope you got a better understanding of some of the ways that leftists sort of talk past the red pill rather than addressing its core points. I hope you share this video because that's the #1 way you can help me grow this channel. I need you to do that. Need you to help me get big. Big and strong. Big and alpha strong. Like this guy says that all red pill guys want to be. And red channels will catch you in the next one.